So in this video I'm going to talk about a subject which has been on my mind quite a lot, and I'm going to tie it in with mythological aspects relating to that of ancient Egypt. Now, the subject which I'm going to talk about today is the generations of the last 70 years. And the reason why I want to get into this discussion is because it's important to what we are facing now in the present. So I'm going to line out what the generations I'm going to talk about are, and the generations I'm going to talk about start with what was called the hero generation, which basically were the generation which partook in World War One and World War Two. And this was the hero generation. This is the generation that fought the wars and died in battle. And this generation gave birth to the silent generation, which grew up in a time when the Second World War was going on. And this generation is what I would call the generation of Osiris and Isis. The generation which, because they saw their fathers go out and fight in wars and came back shattered or either didn't come back, they wanted a world of peace, of prosperity. And they did everything to ensure that. However, the generation that came after them, the Boomer generation, were the generation which unleashed the social chaos which we're in now. Now, this generation is the generation of Set and Nephthys. Set being the Egyptian god of chaos. Set unleashed the chaos onto Egypt. In this sense, the Boomer generation, the generation of Set, unleashed the chaos, the social chaos, onto Western civilization. So that generation unleashed the social chaos, and that's the basic predicament that we're in now, at this present hour. We are in the kingdom here in the Western world of chaos, of social chaos, and you can see it all around us. And to be honest, the social chaos did cause liberation, yes, but then it also brought a whole other aspects to it which have caused quite negative outcomes. And now that the Boomer generation are the generation in power, they're the ones what, make all the laws, run society, make all the various decisions, and So at the moment, Set is on the throne of the West, and it's brought elements into the West, which at the start, to be fair, seemed to not be so bad. And they thought this was an idealized world we're moving towards, but now we're seeing the results, the negative results this brings. So, the generation that comes after, Generation X, this is the generation of Anubis and Maat. They're the ones what had to be very individualistic and had to go on their own spiritual path through the darkness, through the 9 halls, so to speak, the 9 gates. And because they went through that process, they're the ones who are going to lead the next generation through the 9 gates, initiate them. So the generation of Anubis and Maat, the Gen Xers, they are the teachers and the guides. They are the initiators for my generation, the millennial generation, which is the generation of Horus and Hathor. Now, Horus is actually a Greek translation of the original Kemetic word, which was Heru, hero. This means that the millennial generation is the generation that was, which is the generation that has become full cycle. The millennial generation is the next hero generation, but it's going to be a very different from the type of situation the hero generation, the previous hero generation, the one what fought the wars, was in. Because we're in a time of war right now, but it's a very different type of war. It's not the type of war where we go out with guns and tanks and, massacre each other, because we've evolved from that now. The war we're in is a spiritual and intellectual war. And as the myth goes, the lore of Egyptology goes, Horus originally had 2 eyes, but one of his eyes was taken out by Set. Basically, the boomers, being mostly the parents of the millennials, have taken out one eye, so to speak, so that we're half blind. And this is not necessarily, I'm not here to basically put down, all boomers or anything, but what this has done is it's made millennials very naive. They've taken out one of their eyes, basically because the boomers have been brought up in a time of comfort. They lived a life of comfort. And they made sure that the millennial generation has lived even more comfortable lives. So it's made them naive and more unable to deal with what is termed as real hardship, which is what a lot of our ancestors, in our distant past used to have to cope with. And This has made millennials quite weak to a certain extent. So the millennials are a generation that's half blind. We don't have our eyes to see. But there are the millennials out there. They're a minority at the moment who are reclaiming the eye that they lost. And these are the ones which are awakening and going through the initiations. The initiations which are being guided by the Gen Xers, who are initiating the millennial generation into the, you could say, occult understandings of the world. Because we're at a time now where we can do something that's never been done before. But there are certain things that we have to be aware of to make us sure that we don't go back into the cycle that we've been in for thousands of years. And I'm going to list out a number of things that we need to deconstruct out of ourselves. These are what they are. The first one being religion, especially mainstream religion. We need to either fully remove ourselves from these certain religious mindsets or deconstruct them. And this can be done by kind of analysing what religion is and analysing all the different teachings within religion, and instead of just prescribing to one, see them that they do have ancient knowledge within them, but they're there to put you in a box. They're there to put you have a cube around your head. And wherever, you know, these religions, and when I'm talking about religion at the moment, I'm talking about the what people, you know, think when they hear the word religion. Christianity being probably the most prominent in the world. And how we need to, you know, because these religious mindsets, they don't just, you know, we're not just programmed to them from birth. There's a lot of our ancestral conditioning what's been under these certain religions as well. And so we need to kind of deconstruct and remove ourselves from these box mindsets. And realize what actually the gods actually are, which is the gods in the more ancient religions, or primordial religions, are our primordial ancestors, as well as being the archetypes of the psyche. So the second one I want to get onto is scientism, or materialistic science. This paradigm of science needs to go. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't, continue to discover how all the various physical manifestations work, or that we shouldn't, progress in technology or whatever. I'm talking about the idea that matter is all that there is, and that there's no spiritual dimension or metaphysical dimension or hidden consciousness behind that. Is, that paradigm is damaging, and it has done serious damage to to us in the last 200 years, and that paradigm needs to shift. Dramatically. The third one is this ridiculous idea, and if you can't see through this one now, then I'm pretty annoyed that this is still going on, actually. It's the ridiculous idea of this left and right politics, this divisional politics, this left and right, vote this guy for this 4 years, and the next guy you get next guy for this 4 years, but he says he's completely different from this guy, and then he says but then they just do exactly the same thing, because they're all controlled behind the curtain. This idea that they're separate, they're completely separate people with their own minds, and that they're have their own agendas. No, that their agenda, they probably don't even really have much agendas themselves. They're just following up the agenda for the people behind the curtain, and it's ridiculous. And then people fall for it and think that things are going to change when nothing actually ever changes. Oh, that's a big surprise, isn't it? Worked that one out yet? So the left and right paradigm of politics needs to completely just go, as far as I'm concerned. It's absolutely useless. It does no one any favours. It is completely a massive, huge distraction, and I have absolutely no time for it. So that's one other thing we need to get rid of. So now, number 4 is getting back in touch with your roots. And when I mean getting back in touch with your roots, not just looking on your family tree a few generations back and having that as your identity, or that the nation that you're born in, even though that can have a be part of it, it's not the complete aspects of your roots and where you come from. You've got to look deep within your fucking blood. You've got to look deep in you've got to connect to the ancient aspects of your roots. And this goes very far back, and it takes a very long time to do, and there's a lot of pain doing it as well. Trust me, fucking hell. Basically, you might be connected to certain bloodlines which have, might have done terrible things, or at least certain members of that bloodline have, and you have to then, go through their, sometimes vision their experiences and stuff, and it can be quite dark, to say the least. But when you do reach that place of particularly burning through and getting to the more primordial core of it, then you start to see that you're connected to something a lot larger and more, and this does really empower you, and it does tell you a lot about yourself actually, and who you are. And I'm not saying it's the complete aspect of who you are, because we're all in certain avatars, but we've chosen to come into these certain avatars for a reason. And when you hear the ancestral voices, some of it's quite unknown at the start, and you don't know what they're trying to tell you, but when you gradually begin to understand, eventually. So the fifth one is having a connection of nature, and this can be done in multiple different ways. You can connect to the earth if you like, go outside and walk through the forests, or the fields, and and kind of breathe in the natural air and swim in the natural waters and feel that the elements all around you, and also have a connection of the animals, because the animals are one of our greatest teachers, probably even more of a greater teacher than a lot of the spirits that are semi-invisible on this plane. And also the treatment animals as well. One of the things that, I'm not a 100% vegan yet or anything, but I do actually think this is a positive diet to move towards. I think for a lot of people it's going to be very gradual, but the way the animals get treated in these factory farms is fucking disgusting. And then also the idea that then comes into what we consume and stuff, and how much that is taking out of the Earth's resources and stuff. I think this has got to change, and I think it will eventually change on a larger social level, but maybe start with doing it yourself. But other than that, you get back to connecting with nature more. And I know it might be hard for people who live in highly urban areas, that it's kind of hard to do that, but try and get out to the countryside, and even if it's for a day or something, and take a walk through nature, and because you do start to see what actually reality is really like when you start to walk through nature, and it really enlightens you, because these urban areas, they're just complete filled with illusion, filled with these false realities, these simulacras, which just want to vampire off of us and drain our energy. So the sixth one, the final one, we'll get into this, is studying the occult sciences, and the occult in general as a subject. This is very important, and this makes you have a more understanding of not just what's going on out there, but what's going on within you, and you understand how your own psychology works, and then you can also understand how other people's psychology works. And the occult sciences can be very dangerous if you're using it for the wrong purposes, and that could be even on other people, but also on yourself as well. And there's certain occult practices which I don't promote or don't encourage, because I think they can lead people to basically become quite destructive in many ways. And so this one is a very, I mean, I can't go into all through right now because it's such a broad and like deep topic, and really I've kind of been discussing a lot of this stuff on my channel at the moment. I mean, you know, for the past couple of years or whatever. But even though it's been very, I had to put it out in a very simplified way, because it is very, when you start looking into yourself, it's quite complex, and it takes a lot of time to really store all the knowledge within your mind and your memory. But that's a very important one, studying the occult sciences, which I think if you're going to if you are a magician or a shaman, these things, that is necessary to do. So now I listed out the six objectives that we need to do to heal ourselves, to prepare ourselves basically for what's to come in the near future. Because the millennials are going through this process, we have the responsibility of changing the world. And if we change the world this time, maybe a mass awakening might not happen in our lifetime, but as future generations look to us as inspiration, that will filter down to more people in the next generation, and then to more people in the next generation. Because I can tell you, the millennial generation, most of them, I don't think are going to go through this. I think it's going to be a few of us, a minority of us, but we will be the, like I said, the hero generation. We will be the heroes of the next generations. We will be their, I'm not going to say idols, but their inspirations. They'll look back on us and see us as and you know, we may be at the moment kind of very fringe and very, you know, on the edges of society at the moment, but that may not be forever. Well, we may have to be that for the, you know, for our lifetimes, but that's not how future generations may not see us that way. And so, like I said, I'm going to go through it again. The hero generation, which I'm going to call Horus the Elders, the old Horus generation, the ones what fought the war, but it was a different war. It was a physical and war of violence. The silent generation, the generation which was peaceful and compassionate and just wanted everything to be in, a good, it just wanted everyone to have a good, prosperous life and didn't want to cause any trouble or anything. And this is the Osiris and Isis generation, because Osiris is the peaceful, benevolent king. He is he's not a warrior like Horus or Set. He's a ruler of peace and prosperity, and that's, and then you have Isis, which is the mistress of magic and the one of the main goddesses in Egyptian mythology, which pretty much has the feminine function of Osiris, in the way that she's a peaceful queen, and she just basically the side by side of Osiris, but also has and also the primordial mother as well. So then we have the Boomer generation, the generation of Set and Nephthys, which I don't buy the Christian interpretation that Set's just the devil or Satan, because that's just a load of monotheistic bullshit. No, Set is the bringer of chaos. The one that has released the chaos, and that's what the Boomer generation did. They lived in a time of pure prosperity when there was nothing to worry about, so they could just unleash this chaos, onto all over the West, and this was, seemed all right for for quite a while, and no one minded it. Everyone got on with their lives, and yeah, it did. I wouldn't say completely stop, but it did. Overcome hurdles of what we could call racism and homophobia and sexism and all those things, which that's a very I'm not saying that was a bad thing or anything, but putting that aside, it did bring a negative aspect, which is that we rejected the past completely, and that we cut our roots off from our authentic self, which lies in the distant ancient past as well, and that a lot of us has now forgotten that because of that generation, which has allowed us to maybe have a lot more freedoms in some ways, but then if you cut off a man from his roots, he's a complete slave. So in other ways, it's put us into even more slavery than before. Just a very different, form that we don't notice because, when we're not, because basically what's happened is we've become slaves with chains of gold instead of iron. So then comes the Anubis and Maat generation, the Gen Xers. And what does Anubis represent? It represents, from a more simplistic standpoint, the god of the dead, the god of mummification, but in a more esoteric sense, it represents the god of a spiritual death, a death of things that aren't needed anymore. And so this is why that generation was very individualistic. It was very much shredding off that all that collective bullshit what wasn't needed anymore, and they needed to go through a individual, path and down through into the halls of darkness to then come out into the basically go through the hall of darkness to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then go through that and show people the way, and to basically be judgment as well, because Maat represents judgment. So they maybe so the Gen Xers could be judgmental as well in that sense, because they've gone through the initiation which was necessary for them to go through in order to be the guides for the next generation, but also to be judgment as well, to judge those who should be initiated or not. And then we get on to the millennials, which, like I've said, are the generation of Horus and Hathor. Hathor being Horus's consort, the feminine version of Horus. But Hathor also has the other side to her, which is Sekhmet, which is a warrior goddess. And this is necessary for a time that we're in. We're in a time of war, of intellectual and spiritual war. And this is why this generation is the hero generation, the generation of Horus, and as we start off, we're Horus the child, which is naive, which has lived in a life of which comes from because I can remember growing up. I grew up in the 90s, and that was really a time where there was really nothing to worry about. It was where everything was. There was nothing. The economy was going fine, and there was no. Well, there might have been some, but there's no major wars. There's no more geopolitical stuff I can really remember what was going on, and it was all kind of this time where it was kind of okay to actually be nihilistic. It was because there was nothing really to worry about, really. It was a very quite laid back time, and because we were children in that era, we've become accustomed to being in a state of comfort, so to speak. We've been allowed to be children for longer than the other generations, psychologically speaking. We've allowed to be childlike and naive and innocent for longer, in a sense. I'm not talking about every aspect, but you know what I mean. It's so we have had one of our eyes taken away from us, and now some of us have taken that eye back, put it back in, and now we are awakened. And this is where I want to get into the. So it's up to us millennials, us hero, well, at least the ones which are awake like I am, at least to some degree. We are the embodiment of Horus, and I'm not talking about the Crowley's interpretation, which is the Aeon of Horus, which, you know, I'm not, I haven't got any serious problem with Aleister Crowley, like, you know, some other people do, but I'm just saying this is not my interpretation is not the same as Crowley's. It's more the in the interpretation of the original ancient Egyptian mythos. We are the ones who are expected to be the heroes. And with that, this means that we have to get prepared. Because we haven't actually seen the worst of it yet. And I'm not talking about on a, you know, in the terms of, like I said, in terms of war. I'm not talking about going out there with a, you know, fighting on these streets, you know, against some other side, because that's the wars we've already fought in the past, or some of our ancestors already fought, and none of those wars work to resolve fucking anything. We're more evolved now than that. We've come to a state of human evolution where we can't go back to that. That's just regressing. We've got to start getting more knowledgeable, and this is why I say get into the books, start reading, start looking for knowledge to acquire, but don't just have it all in your head. Know how to apply it. That's what wisdom is. So knowledge and wisdom is what we need. We also need to have a intellectual framework within us, and know how to communicate these ideas intellectually, and not in the same. I'm not talking about all the what I call pseudo intellectualism, which all these, you know, so-called skeptics and atheists like to, you know, have. I'm talking about true higher intelligence, which then filters down as intellectual, because that's, you know, when you sound more intelligent than your opponent, it looks a lot better, basically, and that does matter. And yes, we also need to start, and this is particularly for the men. We need to start becoming stronger, both physically and mentally. And yes, that means you have to do exercise and train in some form of martial arts. I don't really mind which one it is, but, you know, basically you don't have to become absolutely obsessed with it and make it your absolute life, but becoming more physically stronger. I've been doing it for the last few years now, and it does make you feel better. So even if you're not doing it to you know, you're not doing it because you want to get into a fight with someone, because, you know, because that's just, you know, that's not on about, not only about doing it just because you want to, like, look hard and stuff. No, this is because this is what men need to actually do. This is because otherwise we're the ones that need to defend the feminine. The female. So if men aren't strong, then that leaves the female to become completely destroyed. So that's another thing for men, to become more stronger mentally and physically. More for the what I would say for that for the woman is to realize that nurturing is a fundamental part of your nature, and that looking after and having that need to look after and take care of people and take care of your family and stuff, and to be nurturing and to be emotionally understand the various emotions which us men can understand, but we can't understand are not as sensitive to it. We're not we're more numb to it, so we don't immediately get it. But women can understand and kind of be supportive to that, in a way. Being a looking after the home and the community is what women are designed for, whereas men are designed for as the defenders, the protectors, and the what do you call it? The gatherers, in a sense. So that's what I wanted to say for now. I'm feeling actually a lot more positive than the last video I did, because I was kind of in a state where I was more lost on solutions, and not that I was completely lost, but I was just probably a bit more pessimistic rather than optimistic. Whereas now I'm kind of feeling a bit more optimistic, and maybe I might go back into a more pessimistic phase in the future. I don't know. It kind of does go, through phases sometimes. So, but yeah. So this is probably where I'm going to leave it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, bye.